Near mint condition, the home of collected editions. And check out that eye, that's exactly what we want to see. Woo, look at that panel, baby. And that, as they say, is that. Now, light our darkest hour. How's it going, all you minties? This is the Uncanny Omar from Near Mint Condition, the home of collected editions. And today, it gives me absolute great pleasure to get to do an overview of the Transformers Compendium Volume 1 from Skybound and Image Comics. So let's go ahead and get started. And welcome back, everybody. Now, before we go any further, I do want to say that this is the standard edition cover. This is the one that's going to be available everywhere, but this book does have another cover, and that is your direct market cover. That's the one that's only going to be available through places like cheapgraphicnovels.com, waltzcomicshop.com, bdcosmos.com, organicpricebooks.com, comicsbugle.com, readcomics.com, forbiddenplanet.com, and other places online, and of course your local comic book store. Now, of course, everything underneath this design of the art on board is the same. So here we have the Transformers. Love that logo. Never gets old. More Than Meets the Eye Compendium 1. We have Optimus. This is more of a modern representation of the characters. Bumblebee, Grimlock, and Prowl, and of course Starscream and Thunder Cracker here, just a little bit of him. Budiansky, Springer, Perlin, and Delbo taking the top billing for this particular one. The Image logo at the top. Budiansky, Springer, Perlin, and Delbo, the Transformers, More Than Meets the Eye, Compendium Volume 1. And then, of course, the back of the book with actual panels of, actually, these are all covers of what the artwork looks like inside. So collected in here is what you're going to find right here. The Skybound logo, the Hasbro logo, and the Image logo, the ISBN right here, with the retail price of $59, or I'm sorry, this one is $64.99. And some praise here from Robert Kirkman and Daniel Warren Johnson, who is the new current writer. Now, the stuff in here has been previously collected before in a series of trade paperbacks. The most recent ones were the soft covers released by IDW. The covers that feature the main characters are the ones that actually had all the stories contained inside, then leave out like issue number 3 or the Circuit Breaker issues. These are the ones that had them complete. So we are going to do a comparison here in a little bit. And practically all of this is collected in here minus like 4 issues. But let's look at the spines of the books here. So these are called the Transformers Classics from IDW, and then this is, of course, the classic stories from Marvel Comics. Same ones that were previously collected here if you saw my reading orders. This really would have made my reading order different. Now, of course, this is going to be mapped different than the 2R1 version of the Compendium hardcovers that are available exclusively through Kickstarter. These, no matter where you get them, are all going to be the soft cover with glued binding, and of course this newsprint type of paper stock. But we are going to do a comparison, like I said, internally with the IDW stuff. Talk about the type of stories found in here, what's collected, and of course, take a closer look at the build after reading the whole thing. Alright, let's go ahead and open this compendium up. There's the Transformers More Than Meets the Eye Compendium 1 title page. And of course, all of the credits here: Bill Mantlo, Ralph Macchio, Jim Salicrup, Bob Budiansky, whose name, oh my gosh, we owe so much of our childhood to. And then pencilers like Frank Springer, Alan Cooperberg, Mike Manley, Herb Trimpe, and Don Perlin, Mike Collins, Jose Delbo, just to name a few. Kim Del Mulder, Mike Esposito, Ian Aiken, some of the inkers, Nell Yomtov, and Gina Hart. Nell actually, I think, coloring the entirety of Transformers. And then letterers like Michael Higgins, Rick Parker. And the editors at the time, we got to keep them in mind too, like Jim Shooter. And kicking it off with Transformers #1, Oh my gosh. Okay, so collected in here is the original Transformers Marvel Series 1 through 46 and Transformers The Headmasters. The book has 1,208 pages and retails for $64.99. So a little bit of background behind this. I know I've done a complete reading order of Transformers, and I talked about the history, so please go and check out that video, especially if you're interested in the history of Transformers and how we got started. But really quick, Jim Shooter was approached by Hasbro to reignite that same fire that was created by the G.I. Joe comic book, because they did not have a cartoon for Transformers, and this new toy line was about to go and be produced. Yes, borrowing a lot from toys in Japan. Like Microman. So again, G.I. Joe, Transformers, really have a lot of ties together. If not for the G.I. Joe new line from the 80s, we wouldn't have Microman. And anyway, but here we are with Transformers. So Jim Shooter approached all of his writers, and nobody wanted to do it because everybody was busy, or just like, hey, the weekend's coming up, and no thank you, even like people like Dennis O'Neil. Jim Shooter just came up with the concept of Cybertron, Decepticons, and Autobots, and then, of course, Optimus Prime. And then Bob Budiansky was like, I'll do it. And Bob Budiansky, within a few days, came up with this entire concept about these beings crash landing on Earth and naming characters like Megatron, like Starscream, like Blaster Huffer. And it's just amazing that we owe so much of our childhood, what we take for granted, to just a weekend of Bob Budiansky creating names and actual the actual stat sheets that came with the toys. So the comic kicked off in 1984 and lasted for 80 issues. Even though you're going to see this at the very beginning in a 4-issue limited series. As a matter of fact, issue 80 says number 80 in a 4-issue limited series. I love that. And I love this cover here by Bill Sienkiewicz. So the premise of Transformers is very similar to that of the cartoon. If you watch the cartoon, we have at the very, very beginning, we have this introduction to the world of Cybertron and how there's a civil war that's going on there, and they have neglected these asteroids that are coming, so the Autobots build the spaceship and they go on this arc and to kind of destroy these asteroids and to clear them. But then the Decepticons learn of the plan and they get into a huge fight, and then the Decepticons and Autobots crash land on Earth, where they are asleep for 4 million years. Volcano erupts, so some of it, borrowed for the cartoon. The volcano erupts and then wakes up the Decepticons and the Autobots. So we fast forward to getting to know our characters here. Now, most interesting thing about this, so this is the very first issue. Even though Bob Budiansky came up with the concept and the names, he was just given the editor duty for the first 4 issues. Bill Mantlow's one of the writers, Ralph Macchio doing the script, Frank Springer. Frank Springer had no idea what some of these toys look like, because he was just given photos of them, and including characters like this. And the toys, just the toys. And some of them were prototypes. So in here, you're going to see a closer look to the toys, especially somebody like Ironhide and Ratchet. But here you have Huffer and Cliffjumper. Some of these are easier to tell who they are, like Bumblebee, again, based on the toys. And then as the series progressed, we got to see more and more of the toys. And I'm sure Hasbro shared more photos with Frank Springer and whomever was working on the series. Now it's Jim Salicrup doing the script. The other difference is that the cassettes, like Ravage and Laserbeak, they can talk. And just like the cartoon, the Decepticons and Autobots are given vehicle forms, because the ARC's computer thinks that mistakes humanity's vehicles for the planet's dominant life form. So that's why it's rebuilt in their image. At least that's the way it is explained here. Now, the fight continues, and then we get the humans that are involved. So we have Buster Witwicky and his dad, Sparkplug. And Buster actually takes a wounded Bumblebee. I'm going to talk about the 4 issues to kind of set this up and kind of give you a little bit of premises to what the rest of the series is like. And then, of course, talk about the building comparison. And Sparkplug, being the mechanic that he is able to fix Bumblebee. Again, Bumblebee looking a little closer to the toy and repairing him. Now, it's a little different in the cartoon. The cartoon, humanity accepts the Transformers, especially the Autobots, as oh, these are the good guys. We're okay with them. Whereas in the comics, they don't really know what to think of these, and they see them as a threat. So because this is a Marvel comic at the time, we get S.H.I.E.L.D. that gets involved. And we get Your Friendly Neighborhood. This is such a great issue because Starscream ends up kidnapping Sparkplug because Megatron wants him to make fuel for the Decepticons. So that's what they feed on. It's not quite Energon here. They're still trying to figure out some things. And Sparkplug's like, okay, I'll do it. So the Autobots got to go and rescue him. By now you're going to see changes in the designs of the Autobots. Again, slowly but surely we're getting there. This is Jesse right here, replacing none other than Carly. So Buster is kind of like Spike, of course, although he's a little bit different. He plays a bigger role in this story. And Jesse is kind of like your Carly. Sparkplug still being the overprotective dad, but also letting his son go on adventures. We get little cameos, like I said, S.H.I.E.L.D. getting involved. So reporters and everybody, like the military, get involved. They're all going to the Decepticon base. So there's an actual team up here of none other than Spider-Man and Gears. Gears and Spider-Man team up to go and save Sparkplug from the hands of the Decepticons. Now, as the series progresses, you're going to see less and less of the Marvel characters. As a matter of fact, by the time you get out of the miniseries, there's really not much of the Marvel characters that are left to talk about. So the 4 issues wraps up with issue number 4, but does it really? Because now we have this big fight between the Autobots and the Decepticons, and Ratchet ends up taking both Sparkplug and Buster to the hospital because with all of the stress, Buster ends up, Sparkplug ends up getting having a heart attack, if I'm not mistaken. This is the scene right here where Ratchet, pretending to be an ambulance, goes in there, and Sparkplug has a heart attack. Now, the Autobots were mad at him for helping the Decepticons out, but he's like, that's okay, I've poisoned the fuel. Way to one-up the Decepticons. Now, when that ship crash landed 4 million years ago, we find out that the Autobots and Decepticons, Megatron and his group, and Autobots led by Optimus Prime, were not the first to wake up. As a matter of fact, millions of years ago, Shockwave, the Decepticon known as Shockwave, woke up, and he created his own robot army called the Dinobots, and they went to the Savage Land. So they disappeared into the Savage Land, never to be seen again. We don't know where they are, maybe. But as the series wraps up, as this miniseries wraps up, we get some closure, we get this big fight, and then the big reveal that this probe that was sent to the Savage Land to find out what happened to the Dinobots, and Shockwave wakes him up, and he takes out the Autobots and Decepticons. So it does say the end, or not the end, because a few months later, the series comes back as an ongoing series, and that is one of the best covers, not just Transformers covers, but best comic book covers of all time. And we have the Honeymooners here. But this now becomes an ongoing series, and Shockwave is a different type of character here. He's more like your Starscream type. Look at, this is dark, man. He is ripping apart the Autobots and Decepticons because he plays more like the role of Starscream. He's never to be trusted, but he's only doing it for his own gain. Like, he wants to build his own army. He doesn't care about the Autobots and Decepticons, and what he really wants to use is this thing called the Creation Matrix. So again, before the movie, and definitely before the new Michael Bay movies, there was this idea of the Matrix that lives within Optimus Prime. Now, that comes to play a little bit later with Buster. And he ends up disassembling Optimus Prime, and Optimus Prime is ahead for a long time throughout the series. I think for the first year. This is the character in issue number 6. Now we're starting to see some new characters appear. Characters that were not in the cartoon, because then the cartoon was picked up and it was doing its own stories. And keep in mind, this is a monthly series. So we're going from 1984 to 1985, and within that year, we're already introduced to a new wave of toys. So here they had to kind of keep up with the new toys that were coming out. But we're also given some new characters. Like, we have this industrialist J.B. Blackrock, who Shockwave teams up with. And we have this young lady right here, who will become really important later on, because this is the character known as Josie Beller, who gets hurt in this particular issue. And as she's laying in the hospital, things happen. Ratchet plays an important role through here. Skids. The Dinobots are actually really smart in here. They're not like the dumbed down, me, Grimlock, think you're an idiot. No, nothing like that. They're actually having conversations. As a matter of fact, later on, there is a big shift in leadership between the Autobots and Decepticons. And here we have Circuit Breaker. Now, there's stories behind Circuit Breaker, of course, her appearing in Secret Wars 2, so technically she's a Marvel character, but because she appeared in the pages of Transformers, so this whole licensing thing that came with the character. But rest assured, you saw Spider-Man through these pages. You saw Circuit Breaker through here. In previous collections by IDW, for example, like the first printings, they did not have Circuit Breaker, nor did they have Spider-Man. And here they are in all their glory. And for the first time in a collection outside of Marvel Comics, we're introduced to Jetfire. We have something really cool on a cover, and I'll get to that here in a little bit. But we do have, like I mentioned, introduction to newer characters and their own type. This is one of the weirdest team-ups right here. And their own type of origin, too. This is the story of Megatron after he gets hurt in battle with Ratchet. He wakes up. He doesn't really have control over himself. So he teams up with a monster, and he's the gun the whole time. One of the weirdest, hell no, we're never doing that in the TV show type of issues. And now we're having introductions of characters like Trax, like Hoist, characters that appeared in the second season like Skids. And yes, the Transformers do end up going to Hollywood. Bumblebee is going to go through some changes. And those changes are not in here. And I'll talk about what that means here in a second. Now, the humans are not the only new characters that appear through these pages. We're also introduced to Straxus, who is a new Decepticon. Like, he's kind of what they did in the pages of IDW's Transformers with the character of Shockwave. Like, making him this evil, like, scientist, mad scientist type of character. And we have more and more characters that appear here that you probably have seen by this point in the TV show, but because this is a monthly series, they took a long time to get in here. Not only that, but they also had to be introduced, like the Conehead Jets, like Ramjet, and those characters. And then, of course, Circuit Breaker making her return through here. Now, because it's a monthly series, and you think about that, the fact that this started in 1984, by the time you get to issues of 1986, you're going to start seeing some of the third wave of Transformer toys. Of course, the third season. Issue 24 is an issue that, in an interesting way, takes Optimus Prime off the map for a while. I'm not going to reveal how, but it is such a ridiculous issue. God, I have a lot of fond memories of this stuff. Computers worked a lot different back then. We do have combiners like Bruticus and Defensor here fighting. But yeah, Optimus is taken off the map for a while. And who will end up leading the Autobots? Well, remember when I said there would be a change, like a shift change within the Autobots? Well, that's none other than Grimlock. Grimlock becomes your new leader. And if you were anything like me, we were like, what? And that's after the big fight with Trypticon. Like, the Dinobots kicked the crap out of Trypticon. And then Grimlock becomes kind of like a tyrannical type of leader, making weird decisions, so much so that characters like Blaster and Goldbug end up leaving the team. And yes, I mentioned Goldbug. Goldbug. We didn't see the transformation, for lack of a better term, between Bumblebee and Goldbug. And that's because the Transformers G.I.Joe crossover is not collected in here. So technically, it's G.I. Joe and Transformers, not the other way around. G.I. Joe and Transformers miniseries is where we're introduced to Goldbug. And that really takes place in between issues 23 and 24. That's where I would read it, and that's where Goldbug appears. So that's not collected in here. That probably will be collected in the second compendium. For the first time, this is what I was talking about. We have Marvel characters. In the previous version, or the previous collection, they took out all of the characters. So for the first time, outside of Marvel Comics, we're given the full cover right here. All right, I said I would not talk about all of these, but there are some important things to talk about in case people are wondering, especially for people that came from, of course, watching the cartoon. This is a lot different. You're going to see, like, characters that were not big players in the cartoon play a big role through here. Here's the Combaticons fighting against, I believe that's Superior, no, Defensor right there. Now, because there was delays, right? Like, people had to get caught up with writing, there were a couple of fill-in stories here. Nothing unusual for Marvel to do. They were doing it all the way in the 60s and 70s with reprints. But what they reprinted here was something so unique to a lot of us that were getting the comic books, and we were like, this art and story is so different. This is the Man of Iron. It's 4 different chapters that were collected from the Marvel UK stories. So it features the characters of like Mirage and Jazz and this character named Sammy. But that's what this is. And that's, for a lot of us, we didn't even know what the heck Marvel UK was until a little bit later. And I will talk about Marvel UK and the mapping and all that here in a second. Child's Play is a very, very famous story right here. This is another Bob Budiansky and Don Perlin story. But it's about the Protectobots imprisoning... well, during this time, they have imprisoned Blaster to take him back to the Ark to stand trial. Remember when I said that he deserted them? The Autobots, because of the way that Grimlock was running things. That's why. But what ends up happening is that these human kids right here at the very beginning, there's 4 of them, they actually end up freeing Blaster and distracting Bruticus, who is coming after the Protectobots. And Blaster helps out and defeats, of course, Bruticus. And it's a really popular story, at least to us, that we're really upset with why he's even going on trial, because it reminds us, like, at the end of the day, the Autobots are always going to do the right thing. They're never going to be evil like the Decepticons are. And even some of the Decepticons aren't as evil as you were led to believe at first. Now, I will say what is beautiful. The freaking Predacons right here that build one of my favorite combiners, and that is Predaking. Now, what is beautifully mapped about this is the actual Headmaster series. So the Headmaster series, if you notice here, is a 4-issue miniseries that takes place in between issues 37 and 38. So issue 37 here ends with Headmasters on Earth. But who the heck are the Headmasters? Well, in the miniseries is where you're introduced to Fortress Maximus, to Scorponok, and other Headmasters. You're also introduced to some of the other characters from the 3rd season. You'll see characters in here like Blur. You'll see characters like Hot Rod. Now, very similar to the cartoon, not the Japanese cartoon, but the American cartoon. The heads are these humanoid characters here. So they have their own name and kind of like their own personalities. Whereas in the Japanese cartoon, it's the heads that make the personality of the Headmaster. So there's Fortress Maximus, yes, smaller than what you're used to. Hard Head, Highbrow, Brainstorm, and Chrome Dome. Some of those characters, of course, were so popular that later on they used them in the IDW series. So the series progresses and we're introduced to Throttlebots, Sparklebots, Sparkler bots, the mini bots. We see a lot of season 3 characters appear through here. We see characters like Grekgar. We see characters like the Quintessons and a lot of the big combiners. And then some that even didn't make it to America. We do see some pretenders show up through here, like Skullgrin right there. And then, of course, the return of their own characters like Circuit Breaker. Skylynx making an appearance through here. And ending it with issue number 46. So that means, and here in the back, this is the only extras, by the way, are just ads for other Skybound books. And then, of course, the Energon universe, the new Energon universe. So that means that issues 47, 48, 49, and 50 are left at the beginning of the next compendium. And that story is the, what is it called? The Underbase story. That one is completely divisive. And when we get to it, we'll talk a little bit about it. But yeah, Trigger Bots, everybody, all the characters that you saw as only toys, never in the cartoon, they all make it through here. And I will say there are character deaths through here. I said that Optimus Prime was taken off the table for a while. You have Grimlock leading the Autobots. You've got like Ratbat leading the Decepticons for a while. You've got the appearance of Galvatron. And then you do have the Optimus Prime, but it's Power Master Optimus Prime. So he's a little bit different than like the Gin Riot version from the Japanese Master Force cartoon. Now, the binding, I just showed a little bit. It is glued binding, of course, and here's what the eye looks like. And again, Compendium softcover with no creases. That is really nice. I mean, I put these through the actual test. Like, I don't just... Because, to me, to do a proper review, I have to kind of recreate how people are going to be reading them, right? This is a reading book, and you have to read them. So I hold them like this sometimes, kind of push them down a little bit. But honestly, yeah, look at that. No crease. That's crazy. Because I've seen some compendiums, unfortunately, that come with like a pre-crease already built in. Now, what I want to do really quick is, besides the G.I. Joe, or the, G.I. Joe and Transformers miniseries, the movie could have been collected in here, the movie adaptation, issues 1, 2, 3, but I can see why they left it out. Oh, what I want to do, though, is actually compare it. Let's compare it to the Volume 1. Okay, so we have the IDW version, of course, just being the first 13 issues, I believe. Yeah, the first 13 issues. And these came with essays and these introductions, but what I want to do is actually compare the book itself and the way that it looks. One thing that you probably notice right off the bat is the cover is just a little bit bigger than the cover over here. And because of the paper stock, it looks a little bit brighter, honestly. And then over here on the right hand side, you can see the images. Seems like they, and I could be wrong, but it seems like they're using the masters from the IDW collection for this over here. Like the actual files, and then this just being printed in this type of paper stock, because it seems like the same amount of details are here. It just looks a little different with the coloring. Here, let's get to Optimus Prime to kind of show you the design. I love the designs of the toys at first. I'm sure Frank Springer was like, what the heck am I even supposed to be drawing here? But yeah, it looks like the same type of files. Of course, the paper stock making the colors look a little different. This is printed in thick matte paper, whereas over here we have like this newsprint type of paper stock. Kind of give you an idea. Yeah, they were still trying to figure out the colors themselves in the actual comics. But let's get to issue number 3, which is one of my all-time favorite issues. And over here, because like I said, they have notes, this is letting you know that it was Jim Salicrup's idea to include Spider-Man in issue number 3. Now, there are no notes over here. There are no editor notes. And yeah, it looks like it's the same files. But this is exactly what you get. It is the issue with the covers intact and no extras. I think the spotlights will probably be in the second compendium. And if you're wondering about the UK books, they are going to put those out in 2 compendiums. So that's awesome. But if you're wondering, wait, what if I wanted to read them in order? The way they're doing that is only in the Tool All Are One Kickstarter edition. So that is the only way to actually have them collected in order. So what they did, because the series, of course, that was coming out in the UK, was coming out when the US series was also coming out monthly in America, they ran out of reprinted stuff, so they started coming out with their own material in the UK. So that's what the Transformers UK stories are. And some of them taking place in between issues. So the Tool All Are One are actually what's going to be the stories are going to be interwoven into the Transformers reading order. And unfortunately, the only way to get that is through the Kickstarter. Which will be available, the Kickstarter, the box set itself, not the extra bells and whistles, but just the box set with the 4 books, will be available through Cheap Graphic Novels, our sponsor. They're taking pre-orders, I think, right now for that, in case you missed out on the Kickstarter. And I think it's actually the same price as what they were charging for the Kickstarter. But that is it. That is the Transformers Compendium Volume 1. And that, as they say, is that. If you're interested in purchasing this compendium, don't forget to check out our sponsors.
If you're in Europe and you're interested in buying these books, definitely check out Walt's Comic Shop in Berlin, Germany. They have the cheapest pre-order prices, flat shipping rate of €12 for all EU countries, emails answered within 24 hours, waltscomicshop.com, and you can use the code nearmintcon at checkout and get free shipping for all EU countries with your first order over €40. That's Walt's Comic Shop, your reliable source for omnis and premium collected editions in Europe. Ding!
CheapGraphicNovels.com, your online home for graphic novels and collected editions up to 50% off cover price. They have excellent shipping and prompt and helpful service. Check out their bargain deals for up to 90% off cover price. And don't forget, the CGN also takes pre-orders. That way you don't miss out on the hottest releases. And they are currently running a special promotion for you Minties. If you're a first-time customer, after receiving your order confirmation email, reply back to that email and let them know Near Mint Condition sent you their way. They will then apply a free shipping promotional credit to your next order in the US. Cheap Graphic Novels, your source for the hottest books with the kind of deep discount, quality shipping, and customer service that will keep you coming back for more. And that was the content, the page count, and build of this compendium. In the comments down below, let me know if you are picking this up, which cover you're going to get, if you're waiting for the Kickstarter because you want them in hardcover and you want all of the UK stuff intertwined in there in between the US issues. Let me know all those comments down below. Smash that like button on the way out. Everyone stay healthy and safe out there. Much love.